Nation, it's that time of the year. It's getting somewhat cold here in Arizona for fireside chat time. I got a question from somebody on LinkedIn. It looks like I'm helping them with their homework or something, but for school. But I thought it's a good video, okay? And I apologize to the sender if it's coming late. But here's my thoughts, okay? Based on your experience in the field of clinical research, what do you consider to be the most relevant skills that a clinical research professional, whether they're a CRA, study coordinator, data manager, FDA reviewer, whatever the case may be, what are some of the most relevant skills that a clinical research professional should possess in order to be successful in this field, and why? So, the first thing I would say is attention to detail. All right? Attention to detail, absolutely. So you have to know the fundamentals of research, but that's just the first layer. My book that I wrote, the 4-hour video that I made, it's just the first layer. It's mastering the fundamentals. The second layer is where all the details lie, and it's where no matter how experienced you are, if you slack for even a second as far as paying attention to details, and you don't properly train someone to do that, like in the case of a site owner, for example, that's when disaster can happen, because every protocol is different. Every protocol has nuances. I've never seen two protocols that are the same. Even when they're sister studies, they differ slightly. Patient population differs. The inclusion-exclusion criteria differs. The washout medication differs. The study intervention differs. You gotta be someone that wants to constantly learn, because you've never done learning in this industry, and constantly paying attention to details. That's number one. If that's not you, you can still be successful in this industry, but you got to figure out hacks. So if you're a site owner, I know a lot of site owners or site directors that are maybe not so good at paying attention to details. I actually think I fall into that camp. I could force myself to pay attention to details when it's necessary, like in the case where I was a CRA. Absolutely critical that I do that. As a coordinator, absolutely critical I do that. But now when I'm in charge of hiring people and managing people, less important that I do that, but I need to make sure that whomever I'm in charge of is doing that. So that's where the quality assurance, quality control comes in. That's where I've been talking about designing my source in a way to make it to where nothing is missed. And I don't know if you ever can make your source to that point, but you can get it close. So I think that's the first thing, is attention to detail. The second thing is a willingness to learn. A third thing is playing well with others. I've seen so many talented people in this space that can get those first two things right, yet they lack empathy. They lack EQ, the emotional intelligence needed to get along well with other people, whether it's colleagues, whether it's coworkers, whether it's their own staff, whether it's a CRA-CRC relationship in either direction. If people don't like you, you're going to get resentment. You're not going to get help in this industry. And this is a team sport. We all think of clinical research as individual roles: CRC, CRA, data manager, site owner, site director. It's a team sport, because to pull a protocol off successfully requires dozens of vendors, maybe 100 sites, and probably thousands of people just for one study. So you gotta prepare yourself to get along well with others, play well with others, have a high emotional intelligence, and this is something that you can work on. And I think this is the soft skill that is increasingly becoming important in our space. The fourth thing is technology. You have to start embracing technology. If you don't know how to organize your email, if you don't know how to organize folders on your desktop, you're going to have no chance when it comes to eReg. Shout out to Viva, one of the sponsors. When it comes to eSource, shout out to Creo, one of the sponsors. So those are probably the main four things I would say you need to possess. The second question is, given the years that you have already worked in clinical research, what are some of the biggest changes that have occurred over the past decade? that have had an impact on clinical research in general. How have these changes affected various stakeholders in clinical research? I really think it's the movement to electronic everything. Electronic patient-reported outcomes is probably the most under-discussed and underappreciated change that has happened in this industry, because in the previous decades, we went from all the source data being generated at the site, primarily during site visits, occasionally some paper diaries, to we are taking some critical elements out of the site visits, out of the study visits, and we're putting them into the patient's homes on random days, sometimes every day. And these are critical endpoints, critical data points. And we're expecting the patient to do it, number one, to be compliant. And number two, we're expecting a coordinator and a CRA to check this stuff on a daily basis when they are used to. The paradigm is we check between visits, not every day. And a lot of the vendors are dropping the ball by not having alerts going to sites, or there's too many alerts going to sites and sites ignore it because it's just too much bombardment of communication. So electronic, for sure, that has it's going to change the industry. I just talked about eSource. Only 30% of sites use eSource of any kind. Maybe the same number for eReg. In the next decade, that's going to be closer to 100. That's going to have significant impacts on the things I just mentioned. So technology and aptitudes towards technology is going to be even more important. Next question, what are the most significant trends that you see happening now that you can imagine will impact clinical research practice over the next 5 to 10 years? I think it's small as the new big. Is we're getting long tail studies. We're getting studies that are getting more complex. We're getting studies with more data points. I just mentioned the electronic patient-reported outcomes, but we're also getting studies that are looking for even more needle in haystacks. So one of the things in research we used to complain about all the time, we still do, we complain much more about it, is that we're not actually enrolling like real-world candidates in our studies. We're enrolling patients that are cherry-picked. And that's going to continue to be the case because technology is allowing sponsors to make more refined protocols to where very particular IE criteria needs to be met. And that means less total patients overall. That means greater screen fail rate. But that does mean more studies as well. It just means it's going to take longer to find patients, which means all the vendors are going to need to step up. All the coordinators are going to need to step up when it comes to the patients that we already have, keeping them in the studies. That for sure is one of the biggest trends I see. And then last question, based on our discussion today, as well as your own experience, what advice do you have for someone like me that's trying to advance their career? Network. Come to SOS, saveoursites.com. I don't care what stage of career you're in. You need to network with people because these changes are coming faster than they've ever come before. Our industry is growing faster than it ever has before. The challenges are some of the same. The challenges are some new challenges. The opportunities are there. I was taught in business school, there are no problems, there are only opportunities. So if you want to look at it through that lens, which I definitely agree with, you need to network with people. And this is why we're doing things like saveoursites.com, which is open to everyone in the space, not just people from sites, but the framework and the context of all these topics. Industry topics are about how they impact sites, because I think at the end of the day, whatever impacts sites impacts the industry. So that's my thoughts on this. Hopefully it helps you out. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Thank you so much. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.